Oh, the theme music is just worth it. Just enough to sit in here for the great Jody McDonald. That's John McMullen. As Jody likes to say, John, when I fill in, when I pinch hit, whenever you have training camp responsibilities, which you do later today, it's not Mac and Mac, but Mac and Mark, which I appreciate. How you doing, John?
Bad. I'm doing well. Yeah. Well, that's why Jody's the pro, right? I can't figure that out, Mac and Mark. That's good, though. I'm going to go Mike and Mac. How's that? Mark.
There you go.
What am I doing? Mike, Mark.
You know
Mike
what?
Gill, I had Mike Gill on my mind. Oh. Mark and Mac. Mark and Mac.
Nice to see you, John. How's that? So training camp, obviously you had the open practice. All the fans came down, 50,000 plus. Have you come down from that high? Is that exciting for you too, to know that many people are watching what you're watching, breaking down what you're breaking down?
I was surprised how many people were there, to be honest. Partially, first of all, I was angry because the Phillies were playing earlier, so the traffic was awful. So that's my only concern. But I was surprised because they've been doing these things since 2013, and they used to have 2, and then they cut it back to 1. But, the first one with Chip Kelly was the highest attended one, because I think, people didn't realize, this is practice. It's not that exciting. But, in ensuing years, it would go. They had about 45,000, if I remember, somewhere in that range for Chip Kelly's first. And then it would go into the 30s. It was still always impressive. Sometimes they'd reach 40, maybe close to it. It's impressive for a practice, but I think people realized it's not that big of a deal. If we're down there, we'll do it, whatever. But yeah, I mean, boy, they're hyped up this year.
And rightfully so, of course, coming off the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts, runner-up to the MVP, the 3rd best player in the NFL, according to the NFL Top 100. So there's a lot going on, obviously, right now surrounding the Eagles. A lot of reasons to be excited. But I want to break something down with you here right out of the gate here, and that has to do with Brian Johnson, the Eagles' new offensive coordinator and new play caller, which is, I think, the bigger story there. New play caller taking over for Shane Steichen. One of the things that he'll get asked about a lot, him and Jalen Hurts, is how they keep Jalen Hurts healthy throughout the entire season. And one of the things they got into yesterday was allowing Jalen Hurts to actually go out there and be Jalen Hurts, or as Jalen put it, embrace the, quote, uniqueness of his game. But how do you do it as an offensive coordinator? How do you do it as a play caller where you try to limit the amount of times that he might be out there running with the football? How do you eliminate the amount of times that he could be out there? How do you better protect a guy like Jalen Hurts if you're Brian Johnson?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm shocked how many people want to take away the uniqueness of Jalen Hurts' game, number one. And I, by the way, I do not believe the Eagles are in that category or will do that. If somebody could kind of point to me somebody else who has figured out how to stop injuries, I might I might revisit my position. It's not possible, Mark. I mean, they're going to practice at the link today. It's not open, so please don't go down there. The Eagles made it very clear that, don't tell the fans that they can come down to watch practice, but
they'll still tailgate. They'll still tailgate. Yeah,
they're practicing inside Lincoln Financial Field today. Somebody might get hurt. I mean, you hope not. You always hope not. You see the card come out for Patrick Johnson last week. Luckily, not a serious injury, but you see it all over the league. Joe Burrow with his calf injury right away. And you hope for every NFL team, you never want somebody to be injured, but I don't know how you legislate against that as much as people try. And I think the Eagles do a good job when it comes to soft tissue injuries with all the walkthroughs and the days off and things like that, letting guys recover. That's one of the things about Burrow. He practiced one day, was sore. He put on the sleeve, and the next day, bang, he strains his calf. Maybe they learn from that. But when it's an ACL and Achilles, I mean, come on. How do you legislate that? So Jalen's on board, embracing the uniqueness, as you said, Mark. The Eagles are on board. He's one of the best players in football. I'm not trying to limit him. I don't know what the shelf life is, but I'm going to milk everything out of what the shelf life is. I'm not going to try to extend it because that's not possible. I'm going to try to take advantage of the height of his skills while I can. And I think the Eagles understand that. Now, I talked to Shane Steichen a lot about this. You know, there's not a lot of called running plays, and that's how the Eagles protect Jalen Hurts. Now, RPO, that's up to what he reads. You know, that's up, and essentially it's not even up to Jalen Hurts if he does his job correctly. It's up to that edge rusher. You're going to read him. What's he doing? If, you know, that defines whether you're going to throw the football, whether you're going to run it. And if Jalen does it correctly, that's sort of out of his hands. He reads what that particular one unblocked player is doing, and that informs your decision. So Shane would always, you know, buckle up on those games where Jalen ran it 17 times. It might be 5 RPOs. It might be 4 quarterback sneaks. You know, the context is important. You know, how many called running plays is it? It's not 17 called running plays. That's just how the game sort of unfolds. So, but I will say this, the Eagles have been dominant in practice with the quarterback runs. Dominant. I mean, the defense doesn't know what to do, to the point where you're glad they're starting the season against Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins, because they're not going to run the ball. I mean, they're lucky they don't have to face Jalen Hurts, because they don't know what to do when he takes the football down and runs it. And Marcus Mariota, same thing. They've run this quarterback draw inside the red zone 4 or 5 times. It's always the Red Sea parting. He walks in. I'm not taking that away from this offense. And I think anybody who wants to take that away from this offense is, you know, loopy, to be kind.
I think one of the things you said, I think it hit the nail right on the head. And I remember Nick Sirianni even talking about this last year, where maybe they have to take away the option part of the RPO and they just, I don't know, call a run play, either that's lining up under center, whatever it might be, just some sort of handoff that takes away that part of the option for Nick. Because I'm not looking for Jalen Hurts to, you know, be limited or take away that part of his game. I love that part about his game. I think that's what makes him as good as he is. And I think that really also helps up a lot of things for the run game. It also helps the pass game when Jalen Hurts has that ability to take off. But do you think there'll be more opportunities, or at least more chances this year, for Brian Johnson to just straight up call run plays if he feels like that attempt number is getting high for Jalen Hurts?
Well, I know on paper, I mean, I know how Peter King was at camp last week, and he said how he's constructed the deepest team in football. Before, earlier in the offseason, he said, I don't see a weakness. So Peter's obviously not looking at the linebackers, but I digress. It's a very good team, but running back's another position. For whatever reason, you know, Eagles fans will turn the page quickly. Understandably so. Every fan base does it. Miles Sanders had 1,269 yards last year. You know, he had 250 or so touches. That's a lot, and that's production. You can talk all you want about Rashad Penny and his talent when he's healthy. You think he's touching at 200? Are you going to bet on that? He's touching at 200. DeAndre Swift, career high, I believe, 617 rushing yards. Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. There is no Miles Sanders there. So, you know, I don't know if I'm comfortable just handing off the football to that group. I think it's one of the bigger weaknesses on the Eagles team, on an Eagles team that doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. I would say linebackers number 1, and I would say running backs number 2. And that's by design. Those are the 2 positions they devalue. So they're trying to cobble it together. Now, what makes it easier for the running backs, Mark, is the quarterback. The quarterback makes it easier for the Eagles running back because he manipulates spacing and he manipulates opposing defenses with his ability to pull the football and the threat to come out the back end. if you take that away, Eagles aren't the same. So I can't just say, no, we're going to. Now, if you're up, here's where Brian and Shane talk about that. If you're up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, yeah, just hand it off. But if you got to win a football game and it's close, you want Jalen manipulating the spacing so things are easier for Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell. So, those guys aren't Derrick Henry. The Eagles devalued the position, and I think we all agree with the way they've done it, because it doesn't make sense to pay running backs in the modern NFL. But on the back end of that, you don't have great running backs. Same thing with linebackers. Everybody makes fun of the Bears, right? Because they signed TJ Edwards and they signed Tremaine Edmonds and they spent $100 million on off-ball linebackers. And I'm with you. Jody can tell you, I'm first in line. The Bears are nuts. It's a bad organization. That's a bad way to build a roster. But guess what? They're better at off-ball linebacker than the Eagles because they got good players. Now, they don't have good players elsewhere, which is the problem. But in that one little position, they're better. So when you devalue positions, even if you're right, you have an issue with that position.
Fair enough. And the Eagles have certainly for a long time devalued that linebacker position. I want to get to that in just a second, but I do want to ask you about the coordinators here, not just Brian Johnson, but also Sean Desai. How difficult is it, if it's even possible, to get anything out of Sean Desai or Brian Johnson as far as things they might want to do in the upcoming season? Desai taking over for Jonathan Gannon. Any differences there, or how has he been commanding his defensive unit? And then also Brian Johnson, anything you can glean so far from the type of play caller he's going to be?
Not yet. I think the play calling part of it is a feel, because it's Nick's offense, and as Nick says, and a lot of the work is during the week. But I do think there's a feel for play calling that you have in the moment. Shane was very good at it. I like to call it the callback. He would set people up with something in the first half, come back to it in the second half, run something different off the same look. He was really good at that, except for the Gardner Minshew play against New Orleans, but that was Gardner's fault. He was really good at that. And all you have to do is look at the difference between Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen. Shane's a better play caller than Nick. Sorry, Nick. Shane's a better play caller than Nick. Same offense. Everybody's collaborating. So where's Brian Johnson on that scale? Maybe he's better than Nick, but not as good as Shane. Maybe he's better than both of them. Maybe he's worse than both of them. That's kind of wait and see. But they have so much talent on offense. I think they're going to be fine. They're going to out-talent people. They're just going to flat out talent people on offense. Best offensive line in football. One of the best quarterbacks. The 2 top receivers are off the charts. The tight end, unbelievable. They're just going to beat people on talent. So Brian's set up very, very well. Defensively, it's a bigger issue, obviously. You have so much change. Not only Sean, you have a new linebackers coach. You have a new secondary coach. Denard Wilson's gone. Nick Rollis is gone, along with Jonathan Gannon. So you have all that change on the coaching staff. Plus, you got to replace 5 starters. There's a little bit more. And then you have the expectations, right? Because the fan base, and they get mad when I say it, they hated Jonathan Gannon for whatever reason. Bottom line, though, number 2 defense, number 1 passing defense, 70 sacks. They made it to the Super Bowl, which seems to, be, that's not a big deal because you collapsed in the Super Bowl. It is a big deal to make the Super Bowl. Those are pretty high expectations for Sean Desai coming in, because that wasn't good enough, right? That wasn't good enough. The defense blew it, yada, yada, yada. That's what he's walking into. the thing I like about Sean is he's better at branding the defense. And by that, maybe it was his time at Temple. I'll give the Temple shout out for Mark Barzetta.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
He understands the city, I think, a little bit better and what they want to hear, and he uses those terms, palpable. We want you to feel us, but he's playing the same damn scheme. So I think
reflect the city.
Yeah, I think he's better at branding it. And I think that helps. I really do. And maybe he'll be a little bit different in situations. Like yesterday, he was throwing the kitchen sink out there, which I thought was interesting. He had a forced safety look in an end of game situation. He had Derek Barnett dropping as a linebacker, Josh Sweat dropping as a linebacker. He had a 4 defensive tackle look at one point. They have so much depth on the defensive line. So he's doing some weird things to try to figure out what he has, which is interesting. But, let's play this out from a negative direction. If you got a 4 safety look and Justin Evans is out there giving up a big play, how's that going to go over?
Not good. Not good. It's not going to go over well.
If Marlon Tuipulotu's out there instead of, I don't know, Hassan Reddick, because you have 4 defensive tackles and somebody makes a big play, how's that going to look? So it can work both ways. I think it's interesting. He's trying a bunch of different things, a lot of big nickel. But, I think it's more about trying to find out what the players can do at this point. I think it's going to be very similar scheme-wise to what you saw last year.
And I know you've been saying that for quite some time. This is generally speaking what the Eagles want to do, and Sean Desai is going to run something very similar to that. And he's not the one step removed from Vic Fangio, of course, that Jonathan Gannon was. No. But you talked about linebackers a second ago. What's going on with Nakobe Dean at this point? How concerned should we be about this injury? And to add, I'll ask the question that I know people are thinking about right now with adding linebackers to this team in the last couple of days here. Is Nakobe Dean going to be the starting middle linebacker in week 1? Where are we at with at least this competition, if there is one at middle linebacker?
Yeah, I don't think there is. But I do think, they needed a better insurance policy because Nakobe, for all the optimism, he's played 34 snaps. So, I mean, it's probably a good idea to have the insurance policy for the rainy day. We had bad storms. You need insurance, people. And the Eagles kind of figured that out. Nakobe's fine. I mean, they're just, he was working on the side field yesterday. He could play. If it were a real game this week, he could play. That's the Eagles. If you're not 100%, they're not going to put you out there in the preseason. I think it's all about that. I think I think what they want is the better of the two, Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham, to be the linebacker opposite Nakobe Dean. And it's very early. We've seen him for one practice. We're supposed to be able to talk to him today. We'll see. But it seemed to me like they kind of look at Zach as the run stopper and Miles as more of a pass coverage linebacker. So maybe they even piecemeal it. Maybe it's Zach Cunningham on early downs. Maybe it's Miles Jack in obvious passing situations. They can go a lot of different ways, but it's nice to have some guys who played that are veterans that know how to play. Because they were it was looking bad at linebacker before those guys got here. Now, I also brought up, if you remember 2016, Mark, Doug Peterson's first year, Jim Schwartz's first year. Well, the Eagles have had trouble at linebacker forever. And the two guys that, TJ Edwards and sort of Alex Singleton that developed, they said, we don't want to pay you. Back then, if you remember, Stephen Tulloch came in, who was a very good player, with Jim Schwartz in both Tennessee and Detroit. Really good player, really solid player. And he came in and we're like, oh, Schwartz has got Tulloch. They'll be fine. He had nothing left. Nothing left. And that's what happens in the NFL. Good players aren't good players forever. So Zach Cunningham was a really good player at one point. Miles Jack was a solid starter. But we have to see, they're on the street for a reason. I don't know how much they have left. But you got to believe they're going to give you a little bit more than Nicholas Morrow or Christian Ellis.
Yeah, I would certainly hope so. And Howie has been good at obviously bringing in guys to at least help, if not with depth, and also come in and have a couple of impact plays here and there. Everyone jumps to the defensive tackles. I know they did at the press conference with Nick Sirianni when he was asked about both linebackers coming in here. It's a similar situation to what you had last year at the D tackle position. But if there's one name that I got to ask you about, it's a name, John, that I did not expect to see as often as I have seen so far in training camp when it comes to the safety position. Obviously, Terrell Edmonds is here. He's got 75 starts under his belt, so he's obviously a veteran. You look at a guy like Sidney Brown, who I thought would be competing for that number one spot to play next to Reed Blankenship. But the name I have not really expected to see is Kayvon Wallace from the top rope all of a sudden. Does he literally look that much better, or is it honestly a lack of options at the safety position? What is Kayvon doing this year to get his name in the paper as much as I'm seeing it?
He's playing okay. I'm not gonna
okay. You know what? You just answered the question. Moving. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Well,
what's Kayvon got?
It's clear that Reed Blankenship is the Eagles' best safety. I mean, it is overtly clear, crystal clear. And to the point where, and I think my buddy Zach Berman wrote this morning, and he's right. There's sort of like a cognitive bias because he was undrafted. Like if you didn't know Reed Blankenship was undrafted and you just watched every practice, you'd say, "Oh, that guy's pretty good." He has just been rock solid, and he's sort of. I don't even want to go Marcus Epps because I think he's better than Marcus Epps. He's sort of developed into that Marcus Epps. Like he's the guy. He's the guy that's going to be out there, barring injury, every single play. I think he's going to be a good player. Then it comes down to Terrell Edmonds. Still, I would say a little bit ahead of Kayvon Wallace. But ultimately, they want to get to Sidney Brown. You can see the difference between the burst, the athleticism of Sidney Brown. It's pretty clear, but he's making a lot of mistakes. He's a rookie. And rarely do you hear coaches, and if you go back to Sean Desai's last press conference, and Sean, he brought up the mental errors. He said mental errors. Right now there's too many mental errors. With Sidney Brown. So ultimately the end game is to get to Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown. I don't think you're going to get to Sidney Brown by week 1. I don't think he's ready to play. Hopefully maybe by the second half of the season. Until that time, I would still lean Terrell Edmonds a little bit more than Kayvon Wallace, but he's relevant, Mark. And they play a lot of big nickel, a lot of 3 safeties. And when that happens, Terrell Edmonds is going to play linebacker and Kayvon's going to be on the field. So he's going to have a role early in the season. And yeah, maybe he's like one of the biggest guys who have gotten another look, a second chance by the new coaching staff, because maybe he was a little bit pigeonholed by the old coaching staff. And the new guys come in with, hey, we don't have a history with Kayvon, and say, you know what, this guy's playing pretty well. And I think he's taking advantage of that.
John, I got to ask you this. Dallas Goedert addressed the media yesterday, and he referenced Jalen Hurts' work ethic, which we're all very much aware of as far as how hard that man does work to be at the level that he's at right now. But he mentioned that Jalen Hurts took some kind of computer system. I don't know anyone nowadays that has a computer system. I know someone just has a computer, they have a tablet, they have a phone. But Dallas Goedert was like, "Oh, the computer system." He made it sound like Jalen Hurts was working for NASA on the side.
NASA. Well,
what is that?
He's between Johnny Manziel and NASA. Somewhere in between. I don't know if you saw Johnny's 0.0. 0.
No,
the
no
Blutarski, as I call it, 0.0. I'm showing my age, but.
Yeah.
That the Cleveland Browns put a little monitor on his iPad, and he admitted in this, if people want to see the documentary, he watched no film, and that's not facetious. 0.0 film. So yeah, I mean, if you look at the Tom Brady's of the world, the Peyton Mannings, and Jalen's got a similar work ethic, and he's always working to get better, and that's It's part of the difference. And when you have a lot of talent and you work hard, think about Michael Jordan, basketball wise, Kobe Bryant. I love the story of Kobe Bryant. When Allen Iverson, who has tremendous talent, and people in Philadelphia are aware, goes out to play the Lakers, and they're having a little visit and having dinner together. And afterwards, Allen's like, "All right, let's go out." And Kobe's like, "I'm going to the gym." And Allen's going out. And that's sort of the difference between both had phenomenal talent, but one took it a little bit more. And that's kind of like Jalen Hurts. He's always working, always working.
John, you put the quarter in this machine, yes. Well, actually, Darius Slay did. Slay did this, and you followed up, being the Bulldog veteran reporter that you are.
Too veteran.
Tell me.
Here's how veteran. I hurt my neck today, Mark.
How did you hurt?
Sneezing.
What is
sneezing? Getting old sucks, by the way. Yeah. I sneezed. I'm picking up my wife's shoes because she washes them too damn much. And, I didn't want to put them down, and I sneezed pretty violently, and I hurt my neck. That's terrible.
John McMullen, he's on the IL right now. He's on the injury report.
I worked it out because you got to stretch it.
We'll be limited in covering Eagles practice today. But I do want to ask you, John, Darius Slay, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Mailata, Jalen Carter. Which one of those names that Brian Johnson mentioned yesterday to your question about people lobbying for touches, which one of those names is going to get a touch this year?
Because that's a goopy question, I admit. But Slay came in, as you pointed out. Slay came into the tent and said, "Give me the ball." Basically, he always does. So, yeah, if I had to guess somebody, it would be an offensive lineman. Lane's got a touchdown for people that forget. That's always a play that works. I would go Jordan, but not the fullback that fans want from seeing the rugby. And not Jordan Davis, Jordan Mailata, from the rugby clips, and they say, "Give him the football, hand it off." Not handing it off, but you make him tackle eligible, you throw him the football. I could see that happening at some point.
Just give me one toss. Line him up in the backfield, toss it, man, and just get crazy. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. John, are you at the link already? You in your car? Where are you?
No, I am at home. I'm leaving as soon as I get off. Yeah, Lincoln Financial Field practice. Invitation only, so don't show up.
People will still be tailgating outside just looking to get a glimpse of anyone. John McMullen, always great catching up with you. Thank you for doing the opening segment of the show with your Eagles and training camp responsibilities and your writing responsibilities as well. Obviously, you guys know this out there in the chat, and everybody, the Birds 365, Jody Mack and Johnny Mack, obviously every day. I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to fill in for you guys from time to time. So look forward to catching up with you tomorrow. I know it'll be you and me Friday doing the show.
Yeah, whole show Friday. I'm looking forward to it, Mark.
Me as well.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely, the great John McMullen, of course, on Birds 365. He'll be headed to training camp, and coming up in just a little bit, I'll be joined by Bill Colarulo, of course, of Legal Hands to the Face. He's been a guest on JAKIB Media, football analyst. Bill will be joining us coming up in just a minute when we return here on Birds 365.